Hello. This is going to be your first part of science today. There will be actually two things you have to do. This is part one. So on Wednesday, we met in small groups, and what we were working on was an article called Aquatic versus Terrestrial. And what I wanted you to do within your group is to go to your guided science tab in your OneNote, to read the article as a group, and to highlight the most important keywords. What I wanted you to focus on was what was the same about aquatic versus terrestrial ecosystems and what was different. Now, your job today is to use your double bubble note taker and the article that you read and highlighted with your group to basically do a compare and contrast chart. Okay, so your job is to record any similarities and differences on that double bubble map. I will be looking at this sort of as a grade. I say sort of because it's not a test per se, but I am going to look at it and assess your note-taking skills. Now you might be thinking, well, that doesn't seem fair. You're not here today. Well, yeah, but we did learn note-taking for like a month and a half toward the beginning of the school year. So you should be pretty good at doing this already. Now, yeah, it was not inside of a double bubble note taker. However, what I want to know is, can you take key information from an article, synthesize that information, and put it into something else? Okay, and so this was the article. Now, if you were off task that day, or maybe you're not as fast of a worker as some, maybe you don't have the whole thing highlighted. So that would be your first step, is you're going to want to go to your OneNote and make sure that you've got the highlighted stuff done. I did check a few people's OneNotes, and I noticed that some groups mostly got through this bit, but not this last bit here, okay? Luckily, this part is pretty concise in terms of what you might need to use for your note taker. And I'm also going to be very nice, and I'm going to reread you this article today because there's not an option to use the immersive reader on here. So I'm going to make sure that I read this to you one more time. Nice refresher. It's been a couple days. And then, like I said, you're going to use that double bubble note taker to find what is the same and what is different. Okay? And I'll explain how you use that particular note taker. Okay? So let's actually just do the rereading part first, but I want you to remember you're looking for what is the same about both terrestrial and aquatic. That'll go in the middle where I've got these purple bits highlighted. What is different and only in terrestrial will go in these three bubbles. Notice they only come out from terrestrial. That's how you know which one to use, because the spokes, kind of like the spokes on a bike, right, or on a spider web, only attach to terrestrial. So they are only going to go in these boxes if they only belong to terrestrial. Notice that the three middle bubbles attach with spokes to both terrestrial and aquatic. That is why the ones that are the same go in the middle. They attach to both. And notice that, notice that these outer bubbles, I know I'm blocking one, are only attached to aquatic. Therefore, they only belong to aquatic. They're the things that only are in aquatic ecosystems. Okay, so don't worry, I'll review that one more time in a minute. First, I'm going to go ahead and reread this for you. And you're going to want to make sure you have the most important information highlighted. Like I recommended to you the other day, you may want to have the things that are the same highlighted in one color and the things that are different highlighted in a different color. If you want to be really smart about it, you could have things that are the same in one color, things that are aquatic and different in one color, and things that are terrestrial and different in a third color, okay, to really keep track. All right, comparing aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. Let me see if I can zoom on this a bit. Oh, yes, there we go. Aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems are very different, but they're the same in some ways. Let's compare. So when you see something where it's talking about where they're the same, something where it's talking about different, that's your clue. The non-living factors of the two systems or two environments are different. Non-living factors, interesting. Aquatic ecosystems are in water. Terrestrial ecosystems are on land. So that comes after that sentence because they're talking about the things that are not alive. Water and land are not alive, right? And they're very different in both of those two systems. The temperature in an aquatic ecosystem changes slowly. The temperature in a terrestrial ecosystem changes. Sorry, I lost my spot. The temperature in a terrestrial ecosystem can change rapidly over a short period of time. So I'm hearing that the aquatic one changes slowly. The terrestrial one changes rapidly. Rapidly means very quick. The amount of water in an aquatic ecosystem is predictable. That means from one day to the next, or one part of the year to the next, it's going to be easy to tell or easy to guess where that water level will be. You know, you can assume that the ocean's going to be this deep at this time of year when the tide is high or whatever, right? Versus water in a terrestrial ecosystem can vary widely. So from one ecosystem to another, vastly different, and it might change quite a bit depending on the time of year, depending on flooding, this and that. Harder to predict. So I heard a lot of differences in this paragraph. The organisms that are different in the two ecosystems. Apparently I can't read today. The organisms are different in the two ecosystems. Most aquatic organisms can live only in water. Oh, remember, organisms means a living thing. So now we're moving into the living. Before we were talking about the non-living. If they were moved to a terrestrial ecosystem, they would die. So this is like the example I gave the other day. You're not going to put a fish in a desert out of water and expect it to live. And you're not going to put a giraffe in the ocean, right? The same is true for terrestrial organisms moved into aquatic ecosystems. So you can't just flip-flop the animals or the plants, really, from one to another. It doesn't work that way. Okay. Here's a heron. Nice, pretty bird. And here's a fox. Both ecosystems, however, are organized in similar ways. So now I'm hearing that they're going to switch into similarities. The organisms in both aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems all need matter and energy to stay alive. Okay. Then they're going to go into a list that sounds like maybe there's going to be some more similarities. Both ecosystems obtain energy from the sun and matter from the environment. Both have food chains and food webs. Both have consumers that depend on producers to make food, just like the fox is a consumer of mice. Both have decomposers that break down dead organisms and recycle raw materials or nutrients. So the animals that go after the dead animals or the bugs that go after dead things and kind of like clean up. They're like the vacuums of the ecosystem. Herbivores, only plant eaters. Carnivores, only meat. And omnivores, they eat both. And scavengers live in both ecosystems. In both ecosystems, organisms compete for the resources they need to survive. Plants compete for light, animals compete for food, organisms need space and shelter from predators and changes in the non-living environment. The organism that outcompetes the others is the organism that will survive. So, I heard that primarily The differences were listed up at the top here on this first page, 46. And I heard mostly similarities down here. Now, when you get into your double bubble note taker, which is the page below this one on your guided science tab, I believe, how did I label it? Let's find out. Aha, double bubble note taker, here it is. Okay, now, you're gonna look back at the article we just looked at. You're gonna record the similarities and differences. Notice, again, like I just said, the differences, so the things that are only specific to terrestrial are in the green. Just these areas here. The things that are the same are in the middle. That means they are shared by both terrestrial and by aquatic. And finally, things that are specific only to aquatic go in the blue. So here it is. Now you might be thinking, well, geez, not a lot of space to write. Exactly. You are not thinking about writing giant sentences, okay? Think back to the days we did Cornell, our visual note takers. Think about how I said just highlight keywords. You're thinking of keywords and ideas here. You do not need to write complete sentences. That is not what note taking is. However, you need to be specific enough to remember something. So if you just said like food here, like what about it? Okay, so get specific enough. I would say keywords and phrases. You are going to need this because we're going to be doing a writing piece based on some of this information. So you're going to want to have access to it. So your notes need to make sense to you. When you look back at them, you need to have enough information. Okay? And if you want, what's nice is if you're typing in here, if you do want to write complete sentences, I mean, you can, you just do not have to. I would be careful about writing just one word too, because one word isn't going to tell you much. I'd say a few words for each bubble. Now, if you're one of those students who does like to write just more, you like the more the better in terms of the information you got, you can actually go up to home here and you can change the font size if you want to make it like really small. Like 8, I think, is the smallest you can make it. Uh-oh, it hates me. Let me see, why did it change? There we go. Now it's an 8. See how little that is? So you can do that. You can hover over the sides to squish it in a little bit. Oh, it does not like me today. You can move it. Interesting. I wonder why it's not letting me move it. All right, well, it's okay if it goes outside of the bubble, by the way. As long as I know where it belongs, it's not a big deal to me. Like even if it's up here or here, okay? So that is a big part of your job. You're gonna wanna spend some time on this. I mean, I'm talking 30, 40 minutes. I was gonna give you 40 minutes of class time for this. So I'd say about 40 minutes because you got a lot of information to process. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not a strong speller. All right, well, use the article to help you. How did they spell it in the article? So if you're like, oh, I know both need sun and matter. You shouldn't be writing sun and matter. Go back and look at it. You're not going to learn how to spell unless you are looking at the patterns and trying. So you should know, if you're using things from the text, you should spell it correctly because it's in the text, okay? You're not making stuff up from your head. So go back, use your eyes, and write that down, okay? So that is part 1 of science. Now, there will be a part 2, but it's much simpler, much shorter. So spend the majority of your time here, okay? And anything you don't complete, you can do it for homework. But you have all day, so I think you'll be okay.